We no longer have a voice. We have people who have lost their homes, lost their cars, living with family.
It's had a very, very harmful effect on the strength of unions. And that, I would argue, is exactly what Scott Walker wanted.
And I have never in my entire career heard as many teachers before talk about how they fear to speak up, how they're afraid of this.
In February 2011, more than 100,000 Wisconsin union members surrounded the state capitol building. They came to protest a package of anti-union legislation introduced by Republican Governor Scott Walker. Walker decided the way to break Wisconsin's unions wasn't bringing in controversial right-to-work laws. Instead, he stripped public sector unions of the right to bargain most workplace issues. It is now illegal for Wisconsin's public unions to bargain on pension issues, health coverage, safety, hours of work, sick leave, or vacations. Negotiated pay raises can never go higher than the rate of inflation.
Yeah? Do you want this?
Public employees such as Leah Lipska are hurting.
We were check to check before Act 10, and now we're check to nothing for a week to check. I'm down about $700.
Lipska is a 30-year-old mother of three. She works full-time as an IT specialist with the Wisconsin Penitentiary Service. Even so, she's had to turn to food stamps to make ends meet.
This is the food stamp card, and I get like $133 a month, and that's all I get for the month. And then we get WIC. Those are actually paper checks, and on those it says, we get 2 gallons of milk, 1 thing of peanut butter, 1 bottle of juice, 1 dozen eggs. Oh, it's super embarrassing. I try not to use it in town at all where people know me, and I try to use it in Madison where people don't necessarily know me. It's really embarrassing when you're like, and especially since you have to tell them ahead of time, you're like, I'm using this card. And they're sometimes like, oh, it's the food stamp card. And you're like, oh.
With its ability to bargain crippled, the impact on the state employees union was devastating. Membership dropped from 19,000 members to 8,000.
I've literally had people I've talked to who break down in tears, talking about how much they appreciate the union, how much they value it, but they have to pay for their kids' shoes.
U.S. political analyst John Nichols says decimating the union's membership was exactly what Walker was hoping for.
Walker knew that if he could undermine the unions, not only could he get a cheap, easy way to balance budgets, rather than doing fair taxation, progressive taxation, which was the Wisconsin tradition, but he could also weaken his political opposition.
But Walker didn't stop at just taking away collective bargaining rights. He also imposed a 2-year wage freeze, began privatizing government services, and greatly reduced the amount the state contributes to its employees' pension plan. Tim Hudak's Plan B looks a lot like Wisconsin's. Having allegedly yanked his beloved right-to-work plank from his election platform, Hudak still intends to freeze public sector wages for 2 years, privatize more government services, and to go after what he calls the public sector's gold-plated pension plan.
We do not want to be like the Americans. We do not want to have our wages and benefits and our standard of living drove right down to the lowest common denominator. We do not want to engage in that race to the bottom. We want everybody to engage in a race to the top.
Another Hudak Plan B policy is so-called merit pay. Merit pay is a bonus given at the discretion of a manager. With her union less able to protect her right to free speech, this state employee would only agree to speak to us on the condition we didn't show her face and electronically altered her voice.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's very much more now a fear of arbitrary and capricious, retaliatory behavior.
But who benefits if unions are too weak to defend public services? Teacher Peggy Coyne says conservative American billionaires are bankrolling right-wing think tanks and Republican politicians in state after state. The ultimate prize? Privatizing the entire public school system.
At first I thought, oh, that is like way too wildly conspiracy theory. But the more I read, the more I listen to, and when you look at how lockstep the wording is on so many of the legislative pieces that went through Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, you start thinking, you know, we're not conspiracy theory nuts. There is something to this.
Smokey Thomas says when Tim Hudak announced he was ditching his plan to bring U.S.-style right-to-work laws to Ontario, he also said he had something much bigger in mind, which makes the next provincial election very important.
It's your job that's at stake, it's your future that's at stake, it's your pension that's at stake. He's made it very clear he does not like public sector pension plans, do not like the defined benefit plans that we have that give you cost of living raises when in retirement, all those sorts of things. So there's just so much about it he doesn't like. And if he was ever to win a majority, we would be in deep, deep trouble.
The Wisconsin state employees haven't given up the fight. Every day at noon, they gather at the state capitol rotunda to let Governor Walker know they haven't forgotten what he did to them and to their families. And that, when the next election rolls around, this time, they'll be ready.
The crook's going to jail! The crook's going to jail! The crook's going